Welcome to Interviews from Quito. In this week's program, Andy Sebastia speaks to renowned author Raúl Pérez Torres. Recognized around Latin America and the world for his novels and short stories, Pérez Torres has been involved in literature and culture since the 1970s. His works are known for striking portraits of society, human suffering, and hope for the future. He currently serves as the director of Ecuador's Casa de la Cultura in Quito.
How you doing, Raúl? Very happy to see you, and thanks for giving a little bit of time. You serve now as a president of Ecuadorian House of Culture. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of this institution?
Sí, es una institución primero ejemplar en América Latina. Por aquí han
The Casa de la Cultura, or House of Culture, is an exemplary institution for Latin America. Many important people have visited. The presidents of Chile and Peru have both visited to give talks. They both said they want our formula to be replicated in their countries. We have 23 Casas de la Cultura in Ecuador, one for each province, and other projects that serve as extensions to the Casas, with the aim of encouraging Ecuadorian thought, from painting to sculpture, music, literature, sociology, and the arts. The Casa is always full. Our cinema is exemplary. We have the best museum of musical instruments in Latin America.
Es decir, desde todos los ángulos, desde la pintura, la escultura, la música, la literatura, la sociología, las artes, y creo que ha dado mucho resultado. Aquí tenemos siempre llena la casa.
And there is a series of other things which I think add to a fundamental understanding of Ecuadorian and Latin American identity, which is really great for foreigners to experience.
Que creo que para los turistas, para los personajes de otros países, de los Estados Unidos, va a resultar fundamental si es que quieren conocer la identidad del Ecuador, la identidad de nuestra América.
And how does it work, Casa de la Cultura, with the Ministry of Culture? This is a new settlement in the government of Rafael Correa.
Sí, este momento estamos empezando a trabajar de una manera mancomunada como tenía que ser. Es decir, hay la necesidad de
Right now, we are starting to work more closely with the Ministry of Culture. The creation of a national culture policy is now enshrined in the Constitution, thanks to the government of Rafael Correa. The Casa de la Cultura will play an important role in the creation of this policy as a cultural agitator and generator, especially in literature and art.
Este rol de gestión especialmente de la literatura y el arte, ¿no? Básicamente de la literatura y el arte.
Our space, with its rooms, theater, workshops, and museums, is fit for purposes for creating art. So yes, we now are working more closely with the Ministry of Culture, because the new culture minister is someone who has always been in cultural circles, and so is someone who you can talk to and who understands what we need to do. So yes, we want to work together, with the same budget, to strengthen thought and art in our country.
Para poder fortalecer el pensamiento y el arte de nuestra patria.
As a writer, how does the House of Culture support artistic creation?
Los grandes escritores ecuatorianos han tenido algo que ver con la casa. La Casa de la Cultura tiene
I think that all great Ecuadorian artists and writers have had some relationship to the Casa de la Cultura. It is 70 years old. It was born in 1944 under the philosophy and intellect of Benjamin Carrión, one of the great Latin American humanists, who also did a lot of work in Mexico, where he was awarded the Benito Juárez Prize. His work at the Casa de la Cultura was extraordinary. Not only did he help and support Ecuadorian artists and writers, but furthermore, he brought great writers to Ecuador from abroad, as we now do, following his example.
Raúl, you started writing when you were still a child. Tell us about these earliest memories as a writer.
Sí, realmente para mí yo creo que vivía en un ambiente muy pródigo para la cultura, para la literatura. Mi padre era
The environment I grew up in was prodigious for culture and literature. My father was a writer, and he had published 5 books about literature, the Spanish language, and grammar. The family environment was really cultural. I'm the youngest one of 4. And we were all really into culture in one way or another.
De alguna manera. Yo estuve en la escuela municipal Eugenio Espejo y en la escuela en tercer grado yo ya me encargaba del periódico mural de la escuela. Cometíamos ya los primeros poemas.
I went to primary school at the school of Eugenio Espejo, and in 3rd grade I was put in charge of the school newspaper, and it was there that I wrote my first poems. In high school, at Colegio Mejia, I was also in charge of the paper. My father was very well known, and even though he died when I was 5, he had been the principal of the high school that I later went to, and he had formed such strong relationships with the teachers there, and there they inspired me to love literature and be creative.
Que de alguna manera halagaron mi espíritu en lo que respecta a la literatura, en lo que respecta a la creación.
You study in Colegio Nacional Mejías, an emblematic public high school in Quito. What effect did it have on your vocation as a writer? And also in the early 70s, you wrote La Bufanda del Sol, a political and literary journal that brought together most important intellectual figures of the period. Tell us about this experience.
Sí, acaba de morir uno de los compañeros que dio muchos frutos dentro de la revista La Bufanda del Sol, Ulises Estrella.
One of my colleagues who contributed a lot to the Bufanda del Sol magazine, Ulises Estrella, who just died, he was one of the leaders of our group. We had started a new phase in our literature, holding workshops in search of a new specificity, marked less by politics and more by creativity.
Buscando la especificidad de la literatura ya no enmarcada dentro de lo político netamente, sino como un rasgo de la creatividad, como un rasgo de la creación. Entonces tuvimos allí Iván Egues, Abdón Uvidia.
The magazine managed to secure a readership in Latin America during the 1960s and the 1970s, due to its very well-known staff, and due to the collaboration with well-known writers like Julio Cortázar, Mario Benedetti, Ángel Rama, and some of the other best writers in Latin America. I think it was a magazine that achieved a lot with its few issues. Those first issues were made by hand at the Central University in Quito.
De grandes escritores de América se pudo seguir trabajando durante 13 números, que lo hicimos primero artesanalmente, los primeros números, y luego en la Universidad Central del Ecuador.
Ana la Pelota Humana is one of the earliest short stories and a moving portrait of a group of circus performers. What is behind Ana la Pelota Humana?
Sí, ¿no? Cuando yo escribí ese cuento, de todas maneras solamente era el cuento.
I wrote this story after going to the city of Esmeraldas, where I had seen a shabby old circus, where I saw the self-important leader and owner abusing this little girl. And it made me think that it would make a good metaphor for the whole country under a dictator, and also the popular struggles that go on. And I think this metaphor worked very well in this story.
Creo que fue esa metáfora la que cumplió su objetivo dentro de ese cuento de ser.
In this and other stories, human misery and suffering seem to be a constant figure in your books. Can you tell us about this?
Sí, yo creo que sí, porque
Yes, it's true. It's very close to my life. I've lived in poor neighborhoods, and I understood popular struggle, and I have participated in them. In high school, we were all leftists, and I later joined the Communist Party when I was at university. I was always interested in the struggles of marginalized people and neighborhoods. They have not only enriched my writing, but also my ideology.
Do you think that literature needs to be socially and politically committed?
Sí, yo creo que sí. Es decir, todo escritor, todo artista, finalmente
Yes,
en su
I think so.
creación tiene que
Every writer and every artist in his or her creations has to make a space for dreams and a space for reality. We have to recognize that the point of view that we put across and the realities we have lived influence our ideologies. if we have seen a lot of misery, poverty, and pain, this will in turn inform our creation, and that even the most abstract work will show something about the geopolitical reality that you come from.
Abstracto me parece que tendrá un fondo que tiene mucho que ver con la situación geopolítica que se vive, ¿no? Creo que nos ha dejado lecciones especiales de gratitud.
I think that Comandante Chavez left us special lessons of gratitude, of solidarity, of dignity, and of honor. One time I was invited to the inauguration of Telesur in Caracas, and it was one of the 4 or 5 times that I had the opportunity, the incredible opportunity, to speak with him. On that day, we were all in the presidential palace, because there were a few of us, writers, thinkers, poets, and creative people, and he invited us to the palace for lunch. I brought with me 3 books that had been published here, in the Casa de la Cultura, about Simón Bolívar, Antonio Sucre, and Manuela Sáenz.
Yo le llevé 3 libros publicados aquí en la Casa de la Cultura. Se trataba de Bolívar, se trataba de Antonio José de Sucre y se trataba de Manuela Sáenz.
I think that upon receiving the books, and he gave me a deeply felt hug, I think it created a special chemistry between us. Of course, I had the intention of talking to him like with Sáenz or Núñez, like he might have had their spirit in him, and I wanted to talk to him about the vicissitudes he had lived through and suffered in his life, and his marriage, and later about his knowledge of Bolívar, his participation in the struggles against colonialism and for liberation.
En el internado, las vicisitudes que sufrió, que vivió en su matrimonio, el posterior conocimiento de Bolívar, su participación en las luchas de liberación anticolonialista. Pero el comandante Chávez sabía todo eso y mejor.
But Chavez knew all of this, and he knew even more, even better, and he gave us a talk about the following. He wanted to talk about the legacy of Sáenz and Bolívar, and he had a letter that Manuela had given, or she had sent to her husband. It said that it was impossible to return to him. She thought, how could she remain at his side when she had been at the side of the liberator of 5 nations? With him, she found her work vindicated, a great love for what she had been doing, and that she had to be herself, to be her own woman.
Que cómo podía ella permanecer a su lado cuando tenía al lado al libertador de 5 naciones, con quien ella quería hacer su historia reivindicativa de lo que tiene que ser una mujer. Es decir, con ese talante extraordinario.
That's to say that such a visionary, such an extraordinary, brave person, and for us, for all us Latino Americans, that there was a marvelous thing. It was to be there, to know that very few people have known a leader like this, and to think about how many have to know a leader who can multiply the knowledge of a people about their homeland and to make them aware of their greatness.
Que han sido dignas de su patria, que han sido dignas de su heroísmo.
Could you tell us about Teoría del Desencanto? It speaks about shattered dreams of a group of young people. How is this book related to Ecuadorian history in the 1970s?
Sí, yo creo que escribí un poco, no solamente porque fui parte de ese desencanto, es decir, de alguna manera nuestros líderes estudiantiles
I think I wrote this book in part because I myself felt this disenchantment. To say to our student leaders and to our political leaders that we should believe that a revolution was within our reach. And even if it wasn't, we needed to have courage and strengthen ourselves culturally and change our attitudes, like in Cuba, which at the time became a mirror and an example for Latin America. Around this time, I began to travel and I got to see more of Latin America. And these experiences strengthened my spirit and my beliefs.
En un momento dado tuve que salir de mi país, me fui a conocer América Latina y creo que también esas experiencias han fortalecido mi espíritu y mi ideología, ¿no?
How close is this story to your own life experience? Can you tell us about that?
Es muy cercana a mi vida personal, es decir, de alguna manera todos vivimos esa discusión que se daba entre el arte y la literatura.
In one way or another, we all lived this debate between art and literature, between politics and literature, about the state and about the masses. This is some of it, but also this political disenchantment we felt due to everything that happened, not only in Ecuador, but all of Latin America at that time. For Cortázar, the 1970s was the golden age of Latin American culture. And with this I agree. That time produced some of the best examples of human sacrifice, of intellect and courage. So I think that validated our work in literature.
Pero se dieron las posiciones más ricas, más sabias del intelecto humano, del sacrificio, del coraje. Entonces creo que eso validó nuestro trabajo en la literatura y en la vida.
Which is your favorite book in your youth? Which is the main book that affected you as a writer, as a young writer?
Crimen y Castigo fue mi libro favorito. Y Raskolnikov, ese personaje que en algunos momentos yo imitaba hasta su forma de ser,
Crime and Punishment was my favorite book growing up. I was also caught up with some of its characters, and I even mimicked their way of speaking and their way of dressing. So it was that sort of fanaticism. There were many authors, but above all, Fyodor Dostoevsky. My father was a member of the Communist Party, and he left us a huge library full of books, which included many of the Russian greats. Gogol, the great storyteller Chekhov, Tolstoy. I used to be able to quote huge chunks of Crime and Punishment. Those were the fundamental ones. Later in the 1970s, Sartre and René Depestre, great poets like Neruda and Vallejo, and of course the three great Ecuadorian poets, Jorge Carrera Andrade, Alfredo Gagotena, and Gonzalo Escudero, and later César Dávila Andrade.
Y luego los grandes poetas ecuatorianos, ¿no? Tres grandes poetas.
Existentialism, it had a really big influence on my generation. In particular, César Vallejo and César Dávila were big favorites of mine, and they had a very large influence on me and my entire generation.
Un poco ligeras, digamos, pero que marcaron nuestra circunstancia, nuestra vida. Luego, desde luego, Vallejo, yo me sé de memoria los poemas de Vallejo, muchos poemas de Vallejo y los poetas ecuatorianos, como digo, especialmente César Dávila, muy cercano a nosotros, a nuestra generación.
What are the challenges of being a writer in Ecuador?
No ha habido nunca una política cultural que nos enriquezca, que nos resguarde. No ha habido una posibilidad de que se beque.
There had never been a political awareness of culture to protect or help enrich artists in Ecuador. There was no encouragement that writers or artists should travel to get other experiences. This type of thought was completely absent from Ecuador.
Estamos viendo que las cosas mejoren, que se haga una participación más fraterna.
What we are seeing now is that things are getting better. There is a much more dignified existence for Ecuadorian artists now. Their participation is appreciated even more now. As the director of the Casa de la Cultura, I have seen that artists need assistance and they need social security.
Sino al artista. Yo veo como presidente de la Casa de la Cultura esas necesidades vitales de los artistas que ni siquiera tienen seguro social. El desafío es para un escritor, en definitiva para cualquier escritor, no solamente ecuatoriano, sino del mundo, ¿no? Es decir, la necesidad de trabajar con obsesión.
A good artist must be obsessed with their work. If you don't work daily and rigorously, you will never be better than average. This is as good as true for a shoe shine or an artist or anyone.
Necesitas permanentemente obsesionarte con tu trabajo, trabajar todos los días, sacrificar muchas cosas, y eso es lo que da ciertos resultados.
And can you give us a message for younger writers?
No hay un escritor, no hay un artista que salga del nivel medio si es que no trabaja con obsesión, si es que no trabaja todos los
What I say to them is that no one becomes more than an average artist or an average writer without working hard, and even working obsessively, working every day. And this has to be naturally interested in all types of art, cinema, sociology, politics, music, because a holistic education provides a wider vision with which to attack one's art, one's poetry, or literature.
Acometer su literatura, la novela, el cuento, la poesía.
Could you tell us what is the new work you're preparing for 2015?
He terminado un libro de cuentos que seguramente saldrá para
I've just finished a book of short stories, which should come out in March. And I'm currently working on a novel that I've been at for quite a long time, which does require patience. But like I've told you, the work requires a daily, methodical, and responsible approach. Because it's one thing when you're 20 years old, but it's a whole other thing at age 70. And to know that what you leave behind should be something that helps, that gives meaning to your life, and also to the lives of those in your country.
Apoye, que configure, que dé el sentido a tu vida y a la vida de tu pueblo.
And also, what writer are you reading now?
Este momento Murakami, he leído absolutamente todo lo de Murakami, pero en esta vez ha publicado un libro que se llama Underground, que es sobre los acontecimientos.
Right now I'm reading Murakami. I've read absolutely everything by him. But this time it's a book called Underground, which is full of interviews with the victims of the 1995 sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway, and also with interviews of members of the Om cult who carried out the attack. To read these interviews is to understand a bit of what we suffer at this moment to some extent. Loneliness, angst, where we're going, and the need to create gods for ourselves, when reality alone becomes too much to bear.
De lo que estamos viviendo en este momento, un poco la soledad, un poco la angustia, un poco no saber hacia dónde vamos y un poco esa necesidad de inventarnos dioses, ¿no? Cuando la realidad es una sola y es más auténtica.
Thank you, Raúl. We wish you the best of 2015 en la Casa de la Cultura, and we will be attentive of your new book coming out.
Siempre a las órdenes, muchísimas gracias.
We've been with Raúl Pérez Torres, writer and presidente de la Casa de la Cultura Ecuatoriana. My name is Andy Sebastia. We'll see you next time.